The gunshot echoed through the warehouse, and Tae Yang Kang didn't flinch. He'd heard that sound 1,000 times, felt the weight of a weapon in his hand, more often than he'd felt another person's touch. But when he turned to see Keisha Brown standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with terror, her body trembling, something inside him cracked open like a fault line splitting the earth. "Get down!" he roared, his body moving before his mind could catch up. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, wrapping his arms around her as another shot rang out. They hit the concrete floor together, his body covering hers, his heart pounding against her back. She was shaking, her breath coming in short gasps, and he could feel every curve of her body pressed against his. "You shouldn't be here," he growled into her ear, his voice rough with something he couldn't name. Fear, rage, something else entirely. "I know," she whispered back, her fingers clutching at his shirt. "But I couldn't let you face this alone." 3 weeks earlier, the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked pavement of East Los Angeles. Tae Yang Kang walked with the measured confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed, which in many ways he did. His tailored black suit was pristine despite the heat, his expression unreadable behind designer sunglasses. 2 of his men flanked him, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. They'd just finished collecting from a restaurant owner who'd been late on his protection payments. The man had groveled, made excuses about his sick wife and struggling business. Tae had listened with the patience of a stone statue, then given him 1 more week. 1. His reputation was built on such precise mercy, enough to seem reasonable, never enough to seem weak. "Boss," Min Soo, his second in command, gestured ahead. "Something's going on." Tae followed his gaze to where a small crowd had gathered on the corner. Street people mostly, but also a few shop owners peering out from their doorways with expressions mixing concern and disgust. As they approached, the crowd parted instinctively, recognizing the kind of man Tae was even if they didn't know his name. That's when he saw her. A black woman lay curled on her side against the sun-baked brick wall of an abandoned building. Her clothes were clean but worn, jeans with frayed hems, a faded yellow t-shirt that had once been bright. Her natural hair formed a halo around her face, catching the sunlight in a way that made something tighten in Ty's chest. She wasn't homeless, he could tell that much, but she was unconscious in broad daylight on one of the roughest streets in his territory. "Probably drunk," Min Soo muttered, "or high." Tae stepped closer, close enough to see the steady rise and fall of her chest, the way her fingers were curled loosely against the concrete, as if she'd simply laid down and fallen asleep. He crouched beside her, studying her face. She was beautiful, not in the carefully constructed way of the women who frequented his clubs, but in a way that seemed almost defiant. Strong cheekbones, full lips, slightly parted, skin like warm amber in the afternoon light. "Miss," he said, his voice sharper than intended. Nothing. He reached out, hesitating for just a moment before touching her shoulder. "Miss, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open, dark and disoriented. For a moment, they focused on his face, and he saw recognition flicker there, not of him specifically, but of danger. She tried to push herself up, her movements uncoordinated and weak. "Easy," he found himself saying, his hand steadying her shoulder. "When did you last eat?" "I'm fine," she insisted, but her voice was thin, almost breathless. She tried to stand and immediately swayed. Tae caught her, his hands gripping her arms, and felt how light she was. Too light. The realization hit him with unexpected force. She wasn't drunk or high, she was starving. "When?" he demanded again. She met his eyes and he saw pride there, burning bright even through exhaustion. "That's none of your business." Something about that defiance sparked in his chest. Most people in this neighborhood knew better than to speak to him that way. Hell, most people in this entire city knew better. But this woman, who could barely stand, was looking at him like she'd rather collapse again than accept his help. "Min Soo," Tae said without taking his eyes off her. "The car. Boss, we have the meeting with—" "The car," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. The woman tried to pull away from him. "I don't need your help. I don't need anyone's—" Her words cut off as her knees buckled. This time Tae didn't just catch her. He lifted her into his arms, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed nothing at all. "Put me down," she protested weakly, but her head had already fallen against his shoulder, her body surrendering to what her pride refused to accept. "No," he said simply, carrying her toward the black Mercedes that had just pulled up to the curb. His men were staring at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. In 15 years running the most powerful Korean crime organization on the West Coast, he'd never once deviated from business for a stranger, never once let compassion override cold calculation. But something about this woman, her defiant eyes, her desperate pride, the way she'd rather sleep on the street than beg, had cracked something open inside him that he'd thought was long dead. "What's your name?" he asked as Min-soo opened the car door. She looked up at him through heavy eyelids, her resistance crumbling under the weight of exhaustion and hunger. "Keisha," she whispered. "Keisha Brown." "I'm taking you somewhere safe, Keisha Brown," he said, sliding into the back seat with her still in his arms. "You can fight me on it tomorrow." "I'll fight you now," she mumbled, but her eyes were already closing again. As the car pulled away from the curb, Tae looked down at the woman in his arms and wondered what the hell he'd just done. He'd built his empire on ruthlessness, on never showing weakness, on never letting emotion cloud judgment. One moment of mercy could be seen as softness, softness could be seen as weakness, weakness could get him killed. But when Keisha's hand unconsciously curled into his shirt, something in his chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with weakness, and everything to do with a feeling he couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. "Where to, boss?" Min-soo asked from the front seat, his tone carefully neutral. Tae's penthouse was his sanctuary, the one place in the world where no one entered without his explicit permission. It was where he went to escape the constant weight of leadership, the endless calculations and careful cruelty that his position demanded. Taking her there was insane, reckless. "Home," he heard himself say. Min-soo's eyes widened in the rearview mirror, but he knew better than to question. "Yes, boss." As the city slid past the tinted windows, Tae told himself this was temporary. He'd make sure she was fed and safe, give her some money, and send her on her way. Tomorrow this would be nothing but a strange footnote in his carefully controlled existence, but even as he thought it, he knew he was lying to himself, because Keisha Brown had just walked into his life, or rather, he'd carried her into it, and something told him that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Keisha woke to softness. That was the first thing that registered, the sensation of expensive sheets against her skin, the give of a mattress that probably cost more than she'd earned in the last 6 months. For a moment, disoriented and confused, she thought she was dreaming, or dead. Those were the only two explanations that made sense. Then memory crashed back like a wave. The street, the heat, the man with eyes like dark ice and hands that had lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. Oh God! She sat up too quickly, and the room spun. Her head felt clearer than it had in days, but her body was still weak, still protesting the 3 days she'd gone without a proper meal. The bedroom was enormous, decorated in shades of grey and black with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown LA. Everything screamed money and power and danger. "You're awake." Keisha's head whipped toward the voice. The man, Tae, she remembered now, stood in the doorway. In the harsh afternoon light, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe mid-30s, with sharp features and perfectly styled black hair. His white dress shirt was rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with a subtle tattoo she couldn't quite make out, but it was his eyes that held her. Dark, intense, and currently studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "Where am I?" she demanded, hating how her voice shook slightly. "My home. You brought me to your home." The implications of that hit her, and she clutched the sheets tighter. "Did you—" "No," he cut her off sharply, something almost offended flickering across his features. "You passed out from hunger and exhaustion. I brought you here, my housekeeper changed your clothes, and you've been sleeping for 12 hours. He moved into the room, and she noticed he carried a tray. "You need to eat." The smell hit her then. Rice, soup, something savory and rich that made her stomach clench painfully with need. But Keisha had learned long ago that nothing came free, especially not from men who looked like they could buy and sell the world. "Why?" she asked, even as her eyes tracked the tray he set on the bedside table. "Why would you help me?" Tae-yang settled into the chair across from the bed, his movements controlled and precise. "Does it matter?" "Yes." He studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze even though everything in her wanted to look away. There was something predatory about him, something that set off every alarm bell she'd spent 28 years learning to trust. "I don't know," he finally said, and the honesty of it surprised her. "I saw you on that street and I couldn't walk away, that's all." "Men like you always want something," Keisha said, but her words lacked conviction. She was so hungry it hurt, and the food was right there, and maybe, just maybe, she could take this one kindness without it costing her everything. Men like me, he repeated, something dark flickering in his expression. What kind of man do you think I am, Keisha Brown? The way he said her name sent an unwanted shiver down her spine. The dangerous kind. Smart woman. He gestured to the tray. Eat, then we'll talk about what happens next. She wanted to refuse out of pride, but pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not anymore. Not after losing her job 2 months ago, burning through her meager savings in 3 weeks, and spending the last month choosing between rent and food, a choice she'd eventually lost either way when her landlord had changed the locks. Keisha reached for the bowl of rice and soup, forcing herself to eat slowly, even though every instinct screamed to devour it. The food was simple but perfectly prepared, each flavor distinct and comforting. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed the simple act of eating until this moment. "What's your story?" Tay asked, watching her with that unsettling intensity. "I don't have a story," she said between careful bites. "I have circumstances." "Then tell me about your circumstances." She should have refused, should have kept her mouth shut and her problems to herself. But something about the way he looked at her, not with pity but with genuine interest, made the words spill out before she could stop them. "I was a legal secretary," she said, setting down the empty bowl and starting on the soup. "Good job, decent pay. But my boss got caught embezzling from his clients, and when the firm went down, we all went down with it. No references, no severance, nothing. I spent 2 months looking for work, but no one wants to hire someone from a disgraced firm." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out being good at your job doesn't mean anything if your boss is a criminal." "The irony of that statement isn't lost on me," Tay said dryly. Despite everything, Keisha felt her lips twitch. "What are you then? Some kind of businessman?" "Something like that." "Try again." His eyes narrowed, but there was something almost amused in his expression. "You're not afraid of me." "Oh, I'm terrified," Keisha admitted. "But I've been terrified for the last 2 months, and at least now I'm terrified with a full stomach." She set down the empty soup bowl and met his gaze directly. "So, let's skip the part where you pretend to be respectable, and I pretend to believe you. What are you?" Tay stood, moving to the window with that same controlled grace. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "I run an organization that operates outside the law. We have legitimate businesses, but we also have other interests. Protection, gambling, some import-export work." He turned back to her. "People come to me when they need things done that can't be done through proper channels." "You're in the mob," Keisha said flatly. "That's a crude way of putting it, but essentially, yes." She should have been more shocked, should have demanded to leave immediately. But Keisha had grown up in neighborhoods where men like Tai Yang operated in the shadows, where everyone knew the score, even if no one said it out loud. She knew danger when she saw it, and she also knew that sometimes dangerous men were the only ones who could or would help when the world turned its back. "So what now?" she asked. "You're not helping me out of the goodness of your heart." "What's the catch?" Tay moved back toward her, and she hated how her breath caught slightly when he got close. He was attractive, devastatingly so, but that wasn't what made her pulse quicken. It was the intensity in his eyes, the sense that when he looked at her he actually saw her. Not just another face in the crowd, another person to use or discard. He saw her. "The catch is that you stay here until you're back on your feet," he said. "I'll have Minsu, my second, find you work." "Something legitimate," he added when she opened her mouth to protest. "You're a legal secretary. I have lawyers who could use an assistant. You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to get off the street," he corrected. "What you do with it is up to you." Keisha wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her independence and dignity, but she'd been independent and dignified while she'd slowly starved, and neither quality had kept her warm at night or put food in her stomach. "Why?" she asked again because she needed to understand. "You don't know me, you have no reason to help me. So why?" Tay was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke his voice was low and rough. "Because I looked at you on that street, and I saw someone fighting, someone who'd rather collapse than beg, and I thought—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "I thought that kind of strength shouldn't go to waste." Something in Keisha's chest tightened at his words. She'd spent so long feeling invisible, feeling like just another failure in a city full of them. But this man, this dangerous, powerful man, had seen her strength when she'd felt weakest. "Okay," she heard herself say, "but I pay you back. Every cent you spend on me, I pay back." "That's not necessary." "It is to me." Their eyes met and held, and Keisha felt something pass between them, understanding maybe, or recognition. She didn't know this man, but she knew his type. Knew that behind the expensive suit and cold eyes was someone who understood what it meant to fight for every inch of ground you held. 3 months, Tay finally said. You stay here for 3 months, work for my organization, and save every penny. After that, you do whatever you want. Deal? Deal. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Keisha took it. His grip was firm, his skin warm against hers, and she told herself the shiver that ran through her was just exhaustion and relief. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. But sometimes lies were easier than facing the truth, especially when the truth was that she was attracted to the most dangerous man she'd ever met. 2 weeks had passed since Keisha had woken up in Tai Yang's penthouse, and she still wasn't sure if she'd been rescued or captured. Maybe both. The job he'd arranged for her was real, assistant to one of his organization's corporate lawyers, and surprisingly legitimate. She reviewed contracts, filed paperwork, and managed schedules just like any other legal secretary. The pay was excellent, the work engaging, and absolutely everyone she worked with was terrified of her, or rather, terrified of Tai Yang, and by extension, anyone he'd personally placed in their midst. You're doing good work, Mr. Cho, the lawyer she assisted, had told her that morning. He'd barely made eye contact, his hands slightly shaking as he handed her a stack of documents. Very good. Excellent, even. It would have been flattering if it wasn't so obvious. He was afraid she'd report any criticism back to his boss. Now, sitting at her desk on the 20th floor of a downtown office building, Keisha tried to focus on the contract in front of her, but her mind kept drifting to the man who'd brought her here. She barely saw Tai Yang these days. He left for work before she woke and returned long after she'd gone to bed in the guest room, but evidence of him was everywhere. His jackets in the closet, his coffee cup in the sink, the faint scent of his cologne in the hallway. Living in his space while barely seeing him felt intimate in a way that made her uncomfortable. She knew things about him now. How he took his coffee, black, no sugar, that he read in Korean late at night, that he never slept more than 5 hours. She'd learned these things from Mrs. Kim, the housekeeper who came 3 times a week and who seemed to view Keisha's presence with equal parts curiosity and approval. Mr. Kang never brings anyone to his home, Mrs. Kim had confided yesterday while preparing dinner. In 10 years I've never seen him with a woman here. You must be very special. Special. The word had lodged in Keisha's chest like a thorn. Keisha. Minsu's voice cut through her thoughts. She looked up to find Tae's second-in-command standing in her office doorway, his expression as unreadable as always. Boss wants to see you. Her stomach dropped. Did I do something wrong? Just come with me. The drive to Tae's main office, separate from the legitimate business where she worked, took 20 minutes. Minsu didn't speak, didn't offer any hint of what was coming. By the time they pulled up to a nondescript building in Koreatown, Keisha's anxiety had transformed into annoyance. She'd done nothing wrong. If Tai Yang had a problem, he could have called her himself instead of sending his watchdog. The interior of the building was surprisingly elegant, all dark wood and subtle lighting. Minsu led her up a private elevator and down a hallway to a set of double doors. He knocked once, waited for the bark to come in, and then opened the door. Tae's office was exactly what she'd expected. Masculine, expensive, designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A massive desk dominated the space, and behind that desk sat Tai Yang, looking every inch the crime boss he was. His suit jacket hung on the back of his chair, his sleeves rolled up, and as she watched, he stood with that controlled grace that seemed to define him. Thank you, Minsu. Leave us. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the enormous office felt very small. Keisha forced herself to stand straight, to meet his eyes without flinching. You wanted to see me? I have an event tonight, Tae said, moving around the desk. A gallery opening. I need you to accompany me. Of all the things she'd been expecting, that wasn't one of them. Why? Because showing up alone makes me look weak. Showing up with a woman makes me look powerful and settled. And right now I need to look both of those things. The bluntness of it should have offended her. Instead, something about his honesty was almost refreshing. So I'm arm candy. You're an asset, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? His eyes narrowed slightly, and she could see him measuring his words. I'm asking you to do me a favor. You're under no obligation to agree, but it would help me, and I would consider it a personal kindness. The word personal hung in the air between them. Everything about their arrangement had been carefully impersonal so far. Business transactions, practical help, emotional distance. But this was different. This was him asking for something that had nothing to do with debt or obligation, and everything to do with trust. What kind of event? Keisha asked, buying herself time to think. Art gallery opening. One of my... Associates owns it. There will be drinks, conversation, the usual social theatre. He paused. It's a legitimate event. No danger, no drama. When you have to specify no danger, that doesn't fill me with confidence. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Fair point. But I'm asking anyway. Keisha studied him. This man who'd carried her off the street and given her a chance at a new life. She didn't trust him, not completely, but she did owe him. And maybe, just maybe, part of her wanted to see more of his world, wanted to understand what lay beneath the cold exterior. I don't have anything to wear to a gallery opening. Already handled. He gestured to a garment bag draped over the chair in the corner. Mrs. Kim took care of it. Of course he'd assumed she'd say yes, arrogant bastard. But when Keisha looked at the garment bag, she felt curiosity win out over irritation. Fine, but I want something in return. His eyebrows rose slightly. What? I want to know who you really are, not the crime boss, not the businessman. You. If I'm going to be your asset, I deserve to know who I'm working for. For a long moment, Tay just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he nodded. After tonight, I'll answer any question you want. Deal. The dress was stunning, a deep emerald silk that hugged her curves and fell to just above her knees. Keisha had never owned anything this beautiful, this expensive. When she'd emerged from the bedroom, Mrs. Kim had actually gasped, and Min Soo, stoic, unflappable Min Soo, had blinked twice in rapid succession. But it was Tay's reaction that had made her heart stutter. He'd gone completely still, his eyes darkening as they tracked over her from head to toe and back again. When his gaze finally met hers, the intensity there stole her breath. You look. He'd stopped, his jaw tightening. Beautiful. Now as they walked through the gallery, Keisha was hyper-aware of his presence beside her. His hand rested lightly at the small of her back. Proprietary, but not possessive. People watched them, whispers following in their wake, and she realized with a start that she was being evaluated, measured against whatever standards his world used to judge such things. Tay! A man approached, smile bright and calculating. He spoke in Korean, rapid fire and animated, and Tay responded in the same language. But even though Keisha couldn't understand the words, she could read body language. This man was trying to impress Tay, trying to gain favor. Keisha, this is Mr. Park, Tay said, switching smoothly to English. He owns this gallery. It's wonderful, she said, offering her hand. You have a good eye. Mr. Park's expression flickered with surprise. He hadn't expected her to be articulate, she realized. Hadn't expected Tay's companion to be anything but decorative. The realization stung, but she kept her smile fixed in place. They moved through the gallery, Tay introducing her to associates and business partners with practiced ease. And slowly, Keisha began to see the careful dance of it all. Every conversation was a negotiation. Every smile had calculation behind it. This wasn't just a social event, it was theatre, and Tay was the lead actor. You're good at this, she murmured when they had a moment alone near a striking abstract piece. At what? The performance. Making everyone think you're civilized when you're really a wolf in expensive clothing. His lips curved into a genuine smile, the first real one she'd seen. Takes one to know one. Before she could respond, a woman's voice cut through the ambient noise. Tai Yang, I didn't know you'd be here. Keisha turned to see a stunning Korean woman approaching. Tall, elegant, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Keisha's entire wardrobe combined. But it was the way she looked at Tay that made Keisha's stomach tighten. Possessive, intimate, like she had every right to be here. Ji-yeon, Tay's voice had gone flat. I didn't know you were in the city. I came back last week. I've been meaning to call you. Ji-yeon's eyes finally landed on Keisha, and her smile sharpened. Who's this? Keisha Brown, Keisha said before Tay could speak. I work for Mr. Kang. Work for him? Ji-yeon laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Is that what we're calling it now? Tay's hand tightened slightly on Keisha's back. Ji-yeon, don't. Don't what? Don't mention that you've never brought a woman to a public event. Don't point out that you're clearly trying to make some kind of statement. Ji-yeon stepped closer, her perfume cloying. Or don't mention that you've replaced me with enough. Tay's voice was soft but deadly. You don't get to do this. We ended things 2 years ago, and you made your choice. I made a mistake, Ji-yeon said, all pretense of civility dropping away, and I've regretted it every day since. Keisha felt like she was intruding on something private and painful. She started to step away, but Tay's hand held her in place. Keisha, he said, his eyes never leaving Ji-yeon. Would you excuse us for a moment? Pride warred with relief. Part of her wanted to stake some kind of claim she had no right to, but the smarter part knew when to retreat. Of course. She moved toward the bar, her chest tight with an emotion she refused to name. It wasn't jealousy. She had no claim on Tai Yang, no right to feel possessive. They weren't anything to each other beyond a business arrangement. But watching him talk to Ji Yon, watching the way the other woman touched his arm, the intimacy of their shared history, made something dark and ugly twist in Keisha's gut. Beautiful, isn't she? A man's voice beside her. Keisha turned to find an older Korean man with calculating eyes studying her. Ji Yon-song, Tai's first love. Some say his only love. I don't think that's any of my business. No? The man smiled. Then why do you look like you want to tear her apart? Keisha's spine stiffened. I don't know who you are, but I'm someone who knows Tai Yang very well. Well enough to know that bringing you here tonight was a statement. The question is, does he know what he's saying, or is he just trying to make her jealous? Before Keisha could respond, Tae was there, his presence like a wall of ice. Councilman's song. I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. The older man, Ji Yon's father, Keisha realized with a sinking feeling, smiled pleasantly. I make a point of supporting the arts. And family. His eyes flickered between them. You remember family, don't you, Tae? Every day. The two men stared at each other, and Keisha felt the tension crackle between them like electricity before a storm. This was about more than a broken romance. This was something deeper, more dangerous. We're leaving, Tae said suddenly, his hand finding Keisha's elbow. Now. He didn't wait for her agreement, just guided her through the crowd with controlled urgency. They were in the car within minutes, Min Soo driving in silence, while Tae stared out the window, his jaw tight with anger. Tae, not now. They didn't speak the rest of the way home. When they reached the penthouse, Tae poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and downed it in one swallow. Keisha watched him, unsure if she should leave him alone or demand the explanation he'd promised. I want to know who I am, he said suddenly, his back still to her. You want to know what made me into this? Yes. He turned, and the raw pain in his eyes stole her breath. Councilman's Song was my father's partner. They ran the organization together until my father tried to go legitimate, tried to move our family out of the life. Song saw it as betrayal. His voice was flat, emotionless. He had my father killed, made it look like a rival gang. And I spent 10 years working for him before I found out the truth. Keisha's heart clenched. Tae, Ji Yon and I were together when I discovered what her father had done. I thought, he laughed bitterly, I thought she'd choose me, choose truth over family, but she didn't. She married someone Song approved of and left me to pick up the pieces. And now she wants you back, Keisha said softly. Now she realizes she made a mistake, but it's too late. I'm not the same person I was then. He finally looked at her, really looked at her. I can't be. Keisha crossed the space between them without thinking. She shouldn't care this much. Shouldn't feel this connection to a man who lived in violence and shadows. But she did. God help her, she did. You brought me tonight to make her jealous, she said. I brought you because I wanted you there. He reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be something other than what they made me. The air between them felt charged, electric. Keisha knew she should step back, should maintain the distance that kept her safe. But when Tae's hand curved around the back of her neck, when he leaned down with agonizing slowness, she didn't pull away. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like he was giving her a chance to refuse. But Keisha was done refusing, done pretending she didn't want this. She pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and felt him shudder against her. The kiss deepened, grew hungry and desperate. Tae's hands were in her hair, his body pressed against hers, and Keisha felt like she was drowning in sensation, in want and need, and something that felt dangerously close to falling. Then his phone rang. Tae pulled back with a curse, his breathing harsh. He looked at the screen and his expression went hard. I have to take this. He stepped away, speaking rapid Korean into the phone, and Keisha was left trembling and confused. What had just happened? What had she just done? When Tae ended the call, his expression was grim. I have to go, there's a situation. What kind of situation? The kind that can't wait. He grabbed his jacket, then paused, turning back to her. Keisha, about what just happened. Don't, she cut him off, needing to salvage some dignity. It was just a kiss. It doesn't have to mean anything. Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment maybe or hurt, but it was gone before she could be sure. Right, just a kiss. He left, and Keisha stood alone in his living room, her lips still burning from his touch, her heart pounding with emotions she couldn't name and didn't want to face. She'd thought coming here accepting his help was the dangerous choice, but now she realized the real danger had nothing to do with his criminal empire and everything to do with the way he made her feel, because Keisha Brown was falling for Tae Yang Kang, and that might be the most dangerous thing of all. 3 days had passed since the kiss, and Tae had barely spoken to her beyond polite greetings. Keisha told herself she was relieved, that the distance was good, necessary, safe. But every time she caught a glimpse of him, her traitorous body remembered the feel of his hands in her hair, the desperate hunger of his mouth on hers. Now, sitting in Mr. Cho's office reviewing contracts, she forced herself to focus on work. This was what mattered: the job, the paycheck, rebuilding her life, not the magnetic pull she felt toward a man who dealt in violence and lived in shadows. "Ms. Brown?" Mr. Cho's voice cut through her thoughts. "This clause here, it doesn't match the original terms we discussed." Keisha leaned forward, studying the paragraph he indicated. He was right. Someone had altered the payment schedule, buried in legal language designed to hide the change. "This is intentional fraud," Mr. Cho finished grimly, "and if Mr. Kang signs this contract, he'll lose a significant amount of money." "Who drafted this?" "External counsel. Someone Councilman Song recommended." Mr. Cho met her eyes, and she saw fear there. "Ms. Brown, you need to take this directly to Mr. Kang. Now don't go through normal channels." The urgency in his voice sent alarm bells ringing. "Why?" "Because if someone in our organization is working with Song to undermine the boss, they'll try to stop this information from reaching him." He grabbed his phone. "Min Soo will escort you. Go. Now." 20 minutes later, Keisha was being ushered into Ty's office, the fraudulent contract clutched in her hands. He was in a meeting. 3 stern-faced Korean men who looked at her intrusion with open hostility, but something in her expression made him stand immediately. "Everyone out," he ordered. The men left without protest, though one of them, older, with calculating eyes, lingered in the doorway for a beat too long before following. "What's wrong?" Tae demanded the moment they were alone. Keisha spread the contract on his desk, pointing out the altered clauses. As she explained what Mr. Cho had found, she watched his expression go from concern to cold fury. "Song," he said softly, dangerously. "He's making a move. Mr. Cho said someone inside your organization might be helping him, that I shouldn't trust normal channels." Tae's eyes snapped to hers, something dark and appreciative flickering there. "You came straight to me." "Of course I did." The words came out more vehement than intended. "I'm not going to let someone steal from you." "Not after—" She stopped, heat rising in her cheeks. "Not after what?" His voice was soft, but his eyes burned with intensity as he moved around the desk, closer to her. "Not after you saved me," she finished quietly. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. I'm not going to betray that." Tae reached up, his fingers tilting her chin so she had to meet his eyes. "Keisha!" The office door burst open. Min Soo stood there, his usually impassive face tight with alarm. "Boss, we have a situation. Song's men just hit one of our warehouses. They took everything." Tae's hand dropped from her face, his expression going cold and deadly. "Casualties? 3 of our guys are in the hospital." It was coordinated, professional. Min Soo's eyes flickered to Keisha. "They wanted us to know who it was. This is a declaration of war." War. The word hung in the air like a threat. Keisha watched Tae's transformation, the man who'd kissed her 3 nights ago disappearing behind a mask of icy calculation. "Lock down all our operations," he ordered. "Get everyone we can trust to the main safe house and find out who's feeding Song information." "Boss, there's something else." Min Soo hesitated. "They left a message. They want to negotiate. Tonight, at the old shipyard." "It's a trap," Tae said flatly. "Probably. But if you don't show, Song will take it as an admission of weakness. Every rival we have will smell blood in the water." Keisha watched the muscle in Tae's jaw tick as he calculated options, weighed risks. This was the world he lived in, a world of violence and power plays, where one wrong move could mean death. "I'll go," he finally said. "But we do this smart. Full security, multiple escape routes." His eyes found hers. "Min Soo, take Keisha to the safe house. She stays there until this is over." "I'm not going to some safe house while you walk into a trap," Keisha protested. "This isn't negotiable." "Like hell it isn't." She stepped closer, ignoring Min Soo's presence. "You said it yourself, Song is making a move. That means everyone around you is in danger, and hiding me away won't change that. At least if I'm with you, I'll know you're safe." "Safe?" Tay's laugh was bitter. "I'm about to walk into a meeting that will probably end with someone dead. You want to be there for that?" "I want to be there for you." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Tay's expression cracked, something vulnerable breaking through the ice. His hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence surrounding them. "I can't lose you," he said quietly, the admission seeming to cost him. "Not when I've just found you." "Then don't go alone." "Boss," Minsu interrupted carefully. "She has a point. If you show up with a woman, someone Song knows you're protecting, it demonstrates strength, not weakness. Shows you're not scared of his threats." Tay's eyes never left Keisha's face as he considered. She could see him weighing her safety against the strategic advantage, the logical crime boss at war with the man who'd kissed her like she was oxygen, and he was drowning. "You stay in the car," he finally said, "with Minsu armed guards, and if shooting starts, you get out of there immediately. Understood?" "Understood. I mean it, Keisha. Promise me." She saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself but for her. This man who faced violence daily was terrified of what might happen to her, and the realization made her chest ache. "I promise." The shipyard was exactly as ominous as it sounded. Abandoned warehouses, rusted shipping containers, and shadows deep enough to hide an army. Keisha sat in the back of the armored SUV with Minsu, watching through tinted windows as Tay approached the designated meeting spot with 4 of his men. Councilman Song was already there, flanked by twice as many guards. Even from a distance, Keisha could see the arrogant set to his shoulders, the way he looked at Tay like a man who held all the cards. "Can you hear what they're saying?" she asked Minsu, who wore an earpiece connected to Tay's wire. "They're speaking Korean," he said, then paused. "Song is offering Tay a choice. Step down and leave the city, or watch everyone he cares about die." Ice ran down Keisha's spine. "What's Tay saying?" Minsu's expression went hard. "He's calling Song's bluff, telling him he has no power, that the old ways are dead." Through the window, Keisha saw Song gesture sharply. More men emerged from the shadows. Too many men, all armed. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an ambush. "They're surrounded," Minsu said, reaching for his weapon. "We need to—" The first gunshot shattered the night. Everything happened at once. Tay's men returning fire, Song's forces advancing, chaos erupting in the darkness. Keisha watched in horror as Tay took cover behind a shipping container, outnumbered and outgunned. "We have to help him," she said, reaching for the door handle. Minsu grabbed her arm. "Boss said—" "I don't care what he said." She wrenched free, her heart pounding. "I'm not sitting here while he dies." She didn't think, didn't plan. She just moved, out of the SUV, running toward the warehouse where she'd seen a side entrance. Minsu cursed behind her, following but not stopping her. The interior was dark and chaotic, full of the echo of gunfire and shouted orders. Keisha crept along the wall, trying to orient herself, trying to figure out how to help without getting shot. She rounded a corner and froze. Councilman Song stood 20 feet away, a gun trained on someone out of her line of sight. "You should have taken my offer, Tay. Now you'll watch her die first." Her Song was talking about her. Before she could process that, before she could move, another figure burst into view. Tay, moving with lethal grace, his weapon raised. Their eyes met across the distance, and she saw everything in that split second: fear, rage, and something that looked terrifyingly like love. "Get down!" he roared. Keisha dropped as the gunshot echoed through the warehouse. She heard someone fall, heard Tay's rough voice shouting orders. Then hands were on her, gentle hands, trembling slightly as they checked her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" Tay demanded, his face inches from hers. "Keisha, answer me. Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine. She looked past him to where Song lay on the ground, blood spreading across his chest. "Is he dead?" "No. But he will be if he doesn't get to a hospital." Tay's hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. "What the hell were you thinking? I told you to stay in the car. He was going to kill you. So you thought you'd do what? Get yourself killed instead?" His voice cracked, and she saw it then, the terror beneath the anger, the way his hands shook slightly as they held her. "You could have died." "So could you," she shot back, her own fear turning to anger. "And I couldn't just sit there. I couldn't—" Her voice broke. "I couldn't lose you either." Something in Tay's expression crumbled. He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with almost bruising force. She felt him shaking, This man who faced down armed enemies without flinching was shaking because she'd been in danger. "You're mine," he said roughly, his lips against her hair. "Do you understand? You walked into my life and became mine, and I will burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you." Keisha pulled back just enough to see his face. His eyes were wild, raw with emotions he'd kept locked away. This wasn't the controlled crime boss. This was just a man, terrified and desperate and completely undone. "Tay, I love you," he said, the words torn from somewhere deep inside. "I know I have no right. I know it's insane, but I love you. And the thought of losing you—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "It would destroy me." The confession hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Keisha knew she should be careful, should protect herself. But she was so tired of being careful, so tired of pretending she didn't feel what she felt. "I love you too," she whispered, and watched something like relief break across his face. "You arrogant, dangerous, impossible man. I love you too." He kissed her then, desperate and claiming, and nothing like their first kiss. This was possession and promise, and everything unsaid between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "We need to go," Minsu's voice cut through the moment. "Police will be here soon." Tai nodded, but he didn't let go of Keisha's hand as they moved through the warehouse. Outside, the chaos had ended. Song's men had scattered, and Tay's forces were securing the area. As they walked to the SUV, Keisha saw Jiyeon standing by one of the vehicles, her expression devastated as she watched them pass. In that moment, Keisha understood. Jiyeon had made her choice years ago, and now she had to live with it. But Keisha was choosing differently. She was choosing love over safety, connection over security. She was choosing Tai, and as they drove away from the shipyard, his hand tight in hers, she knew there was no going back. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The aftermath was messy. Councilman Song survived, but was arrested by the FBI, who'd apparently been building a case against him for years. Tay's evidence of fraud and conspiracy bought him immunity and earned him a reputation as someone who'd turned on his own kind to save his skin. "They don't understand," Tay said 3 days later, standing at his office window overlooking the city. "Song wasn't my kind. He was my enemy wearing the face of family." Keisha moved to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "Do you regret it, turning him in?" "No." His answer was immediate and certain. "I regret that it took me so long to do it, that I let him operate with impunity for years because I was trying to be strategic." He turned to her. "My father wanted to go legitimate. Maybe it's time I honored that wish." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've spent 15 years building an empire on violence and fear. Maybe it's time to build something different." His hand found hers, their fingers lacing together. "Something legitimate, something you could be proud to be part of." Keisha's throat tightened. She'd watched this man evolve over the past month, watched him transform from the cold crime boss who'd carried her off the street into someone capable of vulnerability and change, but she'd never imagined he'd be willing to give up everything he'd built. "Tay, I don't need you to change your whole life for me. I'm not doing it for you," he interrupted gently. "I'm doing it for us, for the future I want to build with you." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Keisha's heart stopped. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other for a month, but when I look at you, I see my future. I see the person I want to wake up next to for the rest of my life." He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring, a diamond set in platinum, elegant and understated. Perfect. "Keisha Brown, will you marry me?" A month ago, she'd been sleeping on the street, starving and desperate. Now she was standing in a penthouse overlooking Los Angeles, being proposed to by a man who'd turned his entire world upside down for her. It was insane, reckless, completely illogical. "Yes," she heard herself say, her voice thick with tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." The smile that broke across Tay's face was like sunrise, brilliant and transformative. He slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promises and new beginnings. "I found you sleeping on the street," he murmured against her lips, "and you woke up everything in me I thought was dead." "You carried me home," she replied softly, "in more ways than one." The knock on the door interrupted their moment. Minsu entered, his expression carefully neutral as he took in their joined hands and Keisha's new ring. "Boss, the transition teams are ready to brief you on the legitimate business acquisitions, and the lawyers want to review the immunity agreement one more time. Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. Tay's hand tightened on Keisha's. "And Minsu, start looking for a new head of operations for the remaining enterprises. I'm stepping back. Minsu's eyebrows rose, his version of shocked surprise. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. After Minsu left, Keisha turned to Tae with concern. Are you really ready to walk away from all of this? I'm not walking away, he corrected. I'm walking towards something better, toward you, toward the life we're going to build together. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. The organization will survive without me running the illegal operations. I'll keep the legitimate businesses, use them to create something sustainable. And if some of your old associates don't like the change, then they'll learn that the man who carried a starving woman off the street is the same man who burned down an empire to keep her safe. His eyes were fierce, protective. They'll learn that you're mine, and anyone who threatens what's mine will face consequences they can't imagine. Despite everything, despite knowing the violence he was capable of, Keisha felt safe in his arms, because she understood now that Tae's capacity for violence came from the same place as his capacity for love, a fierce, unwavering loyalty to those he claimed as his own. So what happens now? She asked. Now? He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Now we start building our future. I'll transition out of the criminal operations, expand the legitimate businesses. You'll finish your legal degree. He held up a hand when she started to protest. I know you were 2 years into law school when you had to drop out. Mrs. Kim told me. We're fixing that. Tears pricked Keisha's eyes. Tae, you have brilliant legal mind, Keisha. You've proven that over the past month. So you're going back to school, and when you graduate, you'll join my team as counsel. Equal partner, equal voice. He smiled. I need someone I trust to keep me honest as I go legitimate. You've thought about this a lot. I've thought about you a lot, he corrected. About what you deserve, about the life I want to give you. His expression softened. You told me once that you pay back your debts. Consider this, me paying mine. You saved me, Keisha, from becoming the monster I was turning into. The least I can do is make sure you get the future you've earned. Keisha rose on her toes, kissing him with all the love and gratitude and hope she felt. When they broke apart, she saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes, wonder and fear and determination all mixed together. I love you, she said, even when you're being an arrogant crime boss who makes decisions about my future without consulting me. Former crime boss, he corrected with a slight smile, and I'm not making decisions for you. I'm offering you choices. You can accept or refuse any of it, but I'll keep offering until you have everything you deserve. What I deserve is you, she said simply. Everything else is just details. 6 months later, Keisha stood in the bathroom of their penthouse, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her hands. They'd been married for 3 months, a small private ceremony with just Mrs. Kim, Minsu, and a few close friends. Tae had stepped away from the criminal operations entirely, focusing on the legitimate empire he was building. They were happy, stable, building a life together, and now they were about to add to it. Keisha? Tae's voice called from the bedroom. Are you okay in there? She opened the door, the test still in her hand. His eyes went to it immediately, and she watched his expression transform. Shock, then wonder, then pure joy. We're having a baby, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Tae crossed to her in 2 strides, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around. When he set her down, his hands were gentle on her face, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You've given me everything, he said roughly. A reason to change, a future to build. And now, his hand moved to her still flat stomach. Now you're giving me a family. We're giving each other a family, Keisha corrected, covering his hand with hers. That's how this works. He kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of promises. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. I found you sleeping on the street, he said, echoing his words from months ago. The best thing that ever happened to me. You carried me home, she replied, and I've been home ever since. Years had passed, transforming their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Keisha stood in her office, one of 3 senior partners at Kang Legal Group, reviewing contracts for their latest acquisition. Through the glass walls, she could see Tae in his own office, surrounded by executives as they planned the expansion of their real estate empire. He looked up as if feeling her gaze, and smiled, that genuine smile he reserved only for her. Then his eyes shifted to something behind her, and his expression softened even further. Keisha turned to find their daughter had appeared in the doorway. May was 4 years old, with her father's dark hair and her mother's warm brown skin, a beautiful blend of both their heritages. She clutched a drawing in one hand and wore the determined expression that meant she'd escaped her nanny again. Mama, May announced, marching into the office with the confidence of someone who'd inherited her father's commanding presence. "I drawed you a picture." "Drew, baby," Keisha corrected automatically, kneeling to examine the artwork. It showed 3 stick figures, a tall one, a medium one, and a small one, holding hands under a bright sun. "Is this us?" "Uh-huh. That's Daddy, and that's you, and that's me." May pointed to each figure with pride. "We're a family." "Yes, we are," Keisha said, pulling her daughter into a hug. "The best family." May, Tay's voice came from the doorway. He'd crossed the hall from his office, and now he scooped his daughter into his arms. "What did I tell you about interrupting Mommy when she's working?" "That it's okay if it's important," May replied solemnly. "And my picture was important." Tay's lips twitched. "Was it now?" "Uh-huh. 'Cause families are the most important thing." She patted his cheek. "You said so, Daddy." "I did say that," he admitted, kissing her forehead. "And I meant it." His eyes met Keisha's over their daughter's head, full of love and contentment. Family is everything. Later that evening, after May was tucked into bed and Mrs. Kim had retired to her quarters, Keisha and Tay sat on their balcony overlooking the city. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, and between them was a peace they'd both fought hard to find. "Do you ever think about that day?" Keisha asked quietly. "When you found me on the street?" "Every day," Tay admitted. "I think about how close I came to walking past you, how my whole life hinged on that one decision to stop and help. I think about how scared I was," Keisha said, "how I didn't trust you, didn't want to need anyone, and how you proved me wrong about everything." "You proved me wrong too," he said, tilting her face up to his. "I thought I was too far gone, too damaged to deserve happiness, but you saw something in me worth saving." "I saw the man you were always meant to be," Keisha corrected. "You just needed someone to believe in you long enough for you to believe in yourself." Tay kissed her, soft and slow, like they had all the time in the world. Because they did. They'd built this life together from nothing, transformed pain and desperation into love and partnership and family. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "More than I thought possible to love anything." "I love you too," Keisha replied. "My dangerous reformed crime boss who turned out to have the softest heart." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Don't let that get around. I still have a reputation to maintain." "Your reputation is that you're the man who burned down an empire for love," she teased. "That's pretty romantic, even for a former mob boss." "I prefer a successful businessman with a colorful past," he said dryly, then grew serious. "But you're right. I did burn it down for love, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights sparkle below them. This was their home, their life, their future, built on a foundation of trust and sacrifice and the kind of love that transformed everything it touched. Keisha thought about the woman she'd been, desperate, starving, sleeping on the street with no hope left. She thought about the man Tay had been, cold, violent, trapped in a cycle of revenge and obligation. They'd both been lost, both been broken in their own ways, but they'd found each other, and in finding each other they'd found their way home. "Thank you," Keisha said softly. "For what?" "For stopping that day, for carrying me home, for seeing me when I'd become invisible to everyone else." Tay's arms tightened around her. "You were never invisible, Keisha. You were brilliant and fierce and fighting with everything you had. I just happened to be there when you needed someone to fight alongside you." He kissed the top of her head. "And I'll keep fighting for you, for us, for the rest of our lives." "I know," she said, settling more comfortably against him. "That's why I chose you. That's why I keep choosing you. Every single day." The city stretched out before them, vast and full of possibility. Somewhere out there, other lives were unfolding. Other people were facing their own struggles and triumphs. But here, on this balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, Keisha and Tay had everything they needed. They had each other. They had their daughter. They had a future they'd built together from the ashes of their broken pasts, and it was more than enough. It was everything.